Bachman's Basement is a Boink Studios production. And now, on with the show.
Most people think of time as a river, constantly flowing, always renewing itself. But they're wrong. Time is a conveyor belt. And once you've moved past a moment, the moment doesn't just stay behind you. It rots. It loses its flavor. It becomes a ghost of itself. Tonight, we're boarding Flight 29 out of LAX. It's a red eye, full of people looking to sleep through the flyover states. But somewhere over the desert, the now disappeared. 10 passengers woke up to a world where the beer has no head, the matches won't light, and the silence is so heavy, feels like a physical weight. There are no birds chirping, no wind blowing, only the distant rhythmic sound of 1,000 jagged teeth chewing on the horizon. So grab your boarding pass and mind the gap. We're headed into a place where the past is being devoured 1 minute at a time. Welcome back to Bachman's Basement. I'm your host, Chris Clawson, and as always, I'm joined by my friend and co-host, Chris Patton. Before we get into the story, how have you been, man? How's your week?
I have been pretty good. No complaints here. A little busy at work. It was fun though. I got to go on site and hang out with customers. That's always a good time. It's been I started my job by mostly traveling around these great United States of ours. And visiting cafeterias and working with food service staff and central offices and doing all of that. So going from that to being a programmer, let's say I've been my current job for 17 years. So there's been a big gap of when that was a thing. And so it's always fun when you get to go revisit and hang out with customers and do some training and get you out of the monotony of just typing away on a keyboard, doing programming or whatever it may be.
Right.
But yeah, so that's been cool. Did some work on my car today, replaced a top O2 sensor.
I've done that before.
Burnt the shit on my finger, on my guitar playing hand. So now I got this weird combination of blister / callus on one finger, which is interesting.
That sucks. I'm sorry to hear it.
Yeah, it's on my bird finger, so I'm only going to be able to play very, very limited chords, I guess, for the next a couple days. It's not that bad. But I went with the method of I'm going to heat the car up first and let this WD-40 sink in so that when I go to break this thing loose, it will be easier, which it was eeasier.
But it was hot.
But my finger slipped and I touched something, and that was not so pleasant.
Well,
outside of that, man, like nothing to complain about over here. How's your week been? How you been, bud?
Doing pretty good. Went and saw a movie with the wife. We went and saw The Bride, that Maggie Gyllenhaal, Bride of Frankenstein remake / kind of reinvention. I really enjoyed the flick. It's unfortunate that the film is not doing well at the box office, because I think it's kind of maybe ahead of its time as a flick. It's a little weird, but it's also in a lot of ways very similar to the film that came almost 100 years ago, The Bride of Frankenstein from 1935. So in some ways, it's kind of just honoring the past, and in other ways, it's kind of setting. It's an artistic sort of statement. I don't know if you've seen that one, but since it just came out.
I had tried to find this online, a leaked version or something, because I knew I wasn't going to make it out to the theaters, and you wanted to talk about it. And I found a rip, and I saw probably the first 30 minutes of it of the flick.
Yeah.
But I will save any conversation I'll have until I'm able to actually finish it, because the rip I found kind of got a little janky.
Yeah, this
Um,
one is just like it's not for everyone, but it's also just such a visually pleasing movie to look at that you definitely want to watch a good copy of it. Maybe wait till it should be available to rent fairly soon. But yeah, that I liked it, and I can see how a lot of people maybe won't like it. There are not a perfect movie, but I really enjoyed it, and I will be happy to watch it again. So I would recommend it. Then I also picked up because the Oscars were this last weekend. So I was looking at movies and what movies, of course, were nominated. And one of my favorites from last year was on sale because it actually won Best Picture, one battle after another. So I grabbed that sucker for $10 off of Fandango and rewatched that one as well. So I've actually watched a couple movies this week, and man, that movie is just amazing. It's good every time. So I would recommend it. I don't know if you've seen that one, but to anyone out there that hasn't watched that film, although it is maybe a little bit too on the nose for this time, interesting fact about the film is that the writer, Paul Thomas Anderson, wrote this script originally 15 years ago and had just sort of wasn't sure if he was ready to make the film, but he had the script and finally just got it made. I saw a little bit of the film getting made just by chance when I was down in California a couple of years ago, happened upon the movie set. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah,
Anyway,
it's one that I haven't watched. My wife is currently boycotting Elite Leo in
Sure.
general, which has been a hard thing for her, with him being one of her favorite actors. So I've not seen this yet, but I've heard good things, and I know it racked up at the Oscars as far as
it got, I'm pretty sure
best female actress, best male supporting actress, best screen adaptation. I think it won best film.
Best Picture. Yeah. I don't know if it got, I think Sinners got best original screenplay, and then of course Michael B. Jordan got best actor, which hell yeah, that's awesome.
Yeah, and I mean I look at what that movie, one battle after another, is, and if I'm just giving an award without watching it, I would probably still give it to Sinners, because I know that I'll like Sinners more. Just based on the plot. So
one battle is timely in a way that you couldn't there's no way that he could have planned for this to be so timely with sort of concentration camps in America for migrants and things like that. It doesn't lean super heavy. I mean, it's a very political film, but it's also doesn't lean. It's sort of like the first 30 minutes of the film is like sort of that, and then it fast forwards 16 years, and it's a father-daughter story from there, with a man that sort of doesn't remember his revolutionary past. I mean, he remembers it, but he doesn't remember all the things that he's not as sharp as he once was. Let's put it that way, I guess.
Yeah, it was I did not make it all the way through the Oscars, so I didn't get to see Best Picture, or I didn't get to see Michael B. Jordan be given the flowers he deserves for how brilliant he was in Sinners, unfortunately. I passed out around 9:30.
I also didn't watch the the award show, but I just grabbed the clips on YouTube and watched the bits that I wanted, like Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Actress, all that stuff. Just kind of saw some of the bits and pieces. I thought it was cool. Sean Penn, he won Best Supporting, but he wasn't present because he's on his way to Ukraine to do humanitarian work, and deemed that to be more important than sitting at an award show. So,
Yeah, and there was a bunch of people that came out afterwards like, oh, I think you should take the award away. I was like, I don't think that's how it works. I mean, Marlon Brando won Best Actor and sent a Native American up there to uh, give a speech
yeah,
about his
I'd say,
whatever.
you
Your
know,
quality of work shouldn't be affected by
try
your politics, but I know it's the
trying to
Oscars.
go and make the world a better place, certainly should supersede sitting and being awarded a trophy for doing your job well. It's like, great. I'm really happy for him that he won it, because if you see him in that film, you'll go, yeah, he deserved that award, because he's just like his character is so expertly crafted and played by Penn, where it's like, you feel like you've met this guy before. Like, he's just such a, just for lack of he's a piece of shit, really, person. But he's also like somebody that at moments you can sort of like feel bad for in a strange way. Just at moments, though, not like throughout the film. But there are moments in the film where you're just like, oh man, I kind of feel bad for the guy. But yeah, anyway, you just got to see the movie to better understand that. But the movie is exceptionally long. It's almost 3 hours long. So, but honestly, it's so well edited that it does not feel that way. And I respect your wife's decision to boycott Leo, but at the same time, he's my favorite actor, so I'm gonna watch everything he's in. I try to separate the person from the performer and just enjoy them as what they do well. So
Yeah, it's I'm gonna end up watching it at some point, I'm sure. It's just the time that I have to watch movies at this point are when we're together, so it's gonna be it'll
yeah.
be down the road. And that and watching things for this show recently.
Right? Yeah. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
so
the
it's
other, obviously, sat down. I managed to carve out a lot of time for viewing this week. Watch the 3-hour miniseries for this story we're going to be talking about tonight. So,
yeah, which is available in the Internet Archive.
yes.
I watched Ghost Town, the 1988 horror western film
Huh.
directed by Richard McCarthy under the pseudonym Richard Governor. It felt appropriate to talk
Yes.
about this on Bachman's Basement. It's awful. It is awful in a way that is wonderful. I had never seen this one before. It got recommended to me by a friend, and they were like, "Have you never seen this? You gotta check it out." So I don't want to give any spoilers because this is one I want you to check out, and then we can come back and talk about it. But it is very much what it's a Western horror flick.
Okay.
It did $75,000 at the box office.
Oh,
So,
wow. Yeah.
um,
Westerns just don't do it like they used to, at least at the box office.
I mean, the basic story is it's following a sheriff who finds himself amongst the dead in a ghost town while searching for a missing woman. So that is the
setup.
base level setup of this. It's set in kind of Arizona. Very interesting.
Okay.
It's definitely worth a watch. You'll get some laughs out of it for sure.
I enjoy a bad, or what you want to say, a B horror movie, a movie that is crafted with love, but maybe not the best of anything, So
yeah, we have this one has a zombie outlaw who has control over a town through a pact with Satan.
Oh wow! So yeah, this thing is just firing on all cylinders.
Yes. The movie poster itself is just a small western town with a giant skull, like this crappy looking lightning. It's brilliant in all ways that I want one of these kind of movies to be. It is everything that I want trucks to be if I directed trucks with the budget that this film had.
Right. We're going to
so
use trucks going forward as our baseline of like the worst kind of B horror.
Yeah, it's kind of what I do on the 6M. Well, it's better than RoboCop 2, so we're
Yes.
And then let's see. I haven't talked about things I played. I've been playing a game called Poke Rogue, which is a browser Pokemon game. You start out, you get like a set amount of points, and based on what Pokemon you pick, that's how many people you can have on your team. And between each, I think it's every 5 battles, you can buy things to heal your Pokemon, but you don't get healed in between the battles. So the idea is to make it to 100, and then there's a big boss battle and you win. I currently have made it to 37 fights in that game. So it is very much a roguelike. It is interesting and really fun, because you could have like a really great run that might take you an hour, or you could have like 10-minute run. It's like, oh, well, I really screwed the pooch on that.
Right.
So if you're a Pokemon fan, that's great. And then obviously we've been playing Marathon still. So
yeah, that other than Marathon, I've been enjoying there's a Gundam event in Apex Legends, and that game, although I'm starting to my interest is waning in Apex. It's just sort of like the novelty of the game has long worn out. The little 3-second loop that makes a video game entertaining. It's always going to be one of my favorite games, but it's just sort of like, I don't know. It's been there, done that. But the Gundam event is really fun in it. It's a limited time event, and they have a gun in it that you can like launch into the sky and launch a gigantic like AoE attack that's like straight out of the animated show. So pretty cool.
So were you ever a big Gundam person? Because I only really got into Gundam Wing through Toonami.
I honestly, I haven't watched it, but I recognize the imagery of it all, and I love. I feel like Gundam came before Transformers, didn't it? That was sort of like feel like it's the inspiration for Transformers.
So I don't know so there's a weird timeline with Gundam, Robotech, and Transformers, Voltron, I guess to some extent, that I'm not embedded enough into those communities to tell you which one came first.
And I don't know either for sure. So again, not a super fan, but I do love the imagery. I love giant robots, mechs and things like that. So I'm impressed with what they did there, and it's a collab. So there's, it's fully, it looks like Gundam, all the things that they're doing, and it makes me want to go watch the shows, or maybe pick up one of the graphic novels and check it out.
I wish that they could have done, and I love Titanfall and Titanfall 2, but I wish they could have done like a Gundam version of Titanfall, because I'd have been way more into that.
Right, like an expansion, sort of like special. Buy it for $20 and it like makes the game Gundam. That'd be sick.
Yeah. So I like the idea of Apex having Gundams, but the gameplay, you're not going to be able to get in the Gundam and be like in Titanfall, right? Like when you get in a Titan, you're in the Titan kind of thing. And that's what I would want out of a Gundam game. There's been tons of Gundam games over the year. I think there's a Gundam fighting game right now, or has been in the past 3 or 4 years. But it never really gets to where like the show is. You know what I mean? Like I don't know if I'm properly explaining what I want out of a Gundam game, but I would say like Titanfall in space with Gundams.
Yeah,
pretty sick.
Yeah, like I said, I don't know enough about Gundam other than I just like the look of it, and the gameplay is fun. Sort of little twist on Apex with crazy overpowered weapons for this limited time event. But it does, like I said, it makes me want to go see what the all the fuss is about, because I know it's a big deal, and I've kind of always in the back of my mind thought I should check that out, but something else always kind of takes the forefront there. But I suppose talked about our week, we talked about movies, we talked about games. Should we start on the story?
Yes, sir. This is your week to run the show, so I will lay back.
All right. Well, tonight we're going to talk about Stephen King's The Langoliers. It's published in 1990 in the collection Four Past Midnight. Uh, it's a masterclass in high concept suspense, blending locked room mystery with cosmic horror. Uh, Sort of a cosmic horror take on the physics of time, I guess. It begins not with a bang, but with a terrifying hollow silence at 35,000 feet. So the story opens aboard American Pride Flight 29. It's a red eye from Los Angeles to Boston. A group of passengers awakens to a nightmare. The plane is still on autopilot, cruising steadily, but the cockpit's empty, and even more chilling, the rest of the passengers and flight crew haven't just died, they've vanished into thin air. All that remains of them are half-eaten pastries, wedding rings, toupees, pacemakers, and dental fillings just scattered across the upholstery throughout the cabin. The survivors are a motley crew of archetypes, each bringing a specific skill or psychological burden to the crisis that is the story. So I'm gonna kind of go through a few of the main characters here just to kind of better inform us of who these people are. We have Brian Engel, who's kind of the main character. He's an airline pilot who's deadheading to Boston after hearing of his ex-wife's passing in a house fire. His professional calm kind of becomes the group's anchor. Obviously, it's helpful that he knows how to fly a plane too, since they don't have a pilot on the plane until he steps up. Nick Hopewell, he's a mysterious, lethal Englishman who eventually reveals himself to be a government assassin, which plays into the story in various ways. Bob Jenkins, he's a veteran mystery novelist whose deductive imagination allows the group to wrap their heads around this impossible situation that they find themselves in. Dinah Bellman is a blind girl with psychic sensitivities who can see through others' eyes, and she has a sense of what this approaching threat is when they get to where they're headed. Laurel Stevenson is a school teacher looking for a fresh start, serving as the group's emotional anchor. And we have Albert slash Ace Costner. He's a 17-year-old music prodigy who, although most of his life has been sort of cautioned against danger by his parents because they want to preserve his talented hands, he fancies himself a gunslinger in his dreams. His intellect and bravery help the group to bridge several difficult situations throughout the story. And then our antagonist in the story, character called Craig Toomey, he's a high-strung, mentally crumbling investment banker haunted by his abusive father's threats of the Langoliers, which you get in sort of backstory for Craig. They're monsters that eat lazy children. So the story essentially opens. Brian manages to land the plane. It doesn't open, but we're picking up again. Brian managed to land the plane for them in Bangor International Airport in Maine. He decides that because he doesn't know what's going on down 35,000 feet below, and he can't make contact with the ground. And he doesn't want to land in Boston because it's a really busy airport, and he doesn't know what's going on. So he picks Bangor, which, is obviously, classic Stephen King, Maine. But the relief is short-lived. The airport is devoid of any life at all. The group quickly discovers the physics of their new reality. The world around them is muffled. The sound doesn't travel. There's no wind, and the air lacks any smell. Food is tasteless. Carbonated beverages are flat. Matches refuse to light as time goes on. And even the color of the world is desaturated, almost like an old photograph. Bob Jenkins, the mystery writer, theorizes that they flew through an aurora borealis over the Mojave Desert, which was actually a literal rip in the fabric of time, and that they haven't traveled to the past of history books. They've fallen into the immediate past. So in King's universe, the past isn't a destination so much as it's a discarded husk. It's the used up stage after the play has moved on, so to speak.
Yeah, and
Tensions, yeah.
we get the great quote from Bob during this where he says, "We're in the past, but not as it was, as it is after it's done," which I find very, very interesting because it's not really. It's kind of revealing that this isn't some just simple time riff, time travel, Star Trek type thing. It's falling into a discarded layer of reality.
It's almost
Uh,
like Twilight Zone, you know.
Very much so, and I was hooked.
It's a really, really well written story, and it's. I know we were talking about it before, before I got to writing this, and you were like, "This is going to be a tough one because the story is." It's got a lot of moving parts, and a lot of characters, and a lot of sort of plot points to get through. So, just trying to kind of give you guys an overview of kind of what's going on, who's the players in the story, and just kind of how it all fits together. It's definitely worth a read. It is a bit longer. It's about if you're going to listen to it, say like on Audible, it's about a 9-hour story to listen to. And again, it's part of a collection of 4 novellas, similar to King releases these types of things. He does short story collections, and he also does like novella collections, like different seasons. And then this one is 4 Past Midnight. But kind of moving along here, the tensions from the eerie mystery kind of shift over to a visceral horror when Dinah begins to hear the sound in the distance. It's a low rhythmic crunching, like thousands of jagged teeth chewing on dry paper. No one else hears it at first, just Dinah. But people in the group start to understand that it's there, and everyone kind of comes to realize that that this situation, as crazy as it is, something is coming, and that they need to not be here when it gets there. So the Langoliers, as they aren't just a figment of Craig Toomey's traumatized childhood, they're the cosmic janitors of the 4th dimension. So their purpose is to devour the outdated reality and make room for the present. So this is not a place where people should ever be. And unfortunately for our group of time travelers, this is where they ended up. So, um, there's just one problem after another for this group. They're trying to figure out, well, okay, let's, like the writer Bob had said, he made a good deduction as to what this must mean, based on everything that they're seeing and feeling. And everyone sort of agrees. And he's like, well, they're like, all right, well, we need to get out of here. So we need to refuel the plane and get out of here. So the group desperately tries to refuel the plane, a task that's made more difficult because the fuel itself in this, whatever this past, it lacks the explosive potential. But fortunately for them, Albert has a theory that their plane, still being from the present, like themselves, if something is placed in it, can regain its usefulness. But it may take a little time for the thing from this past to catch up to a present usefulness. So that is a theory, and they lean on it. So they begin fueling the plane. And at that same moment, the antagonist Craig Toomey breaks, completely with reality, believing that the Langoliers are coming for him personally, and that Dinah, the little blind girl, is the chief Langolier. That he's just completely lost his mind. He finds a knife in a kitchen and just comes running at her and stabs her, and then runs off into the darkness somewhere. He ends up killing another passenger a little later in the story as well. Nick Hopewell, the British assassin, manages to subdue Craig, a little further on in the story here. But on the promise of the dying young girl, she tells him not to kill Toomey, as he is necessary. She doesn't understand why he's necessary, but she just knows that he's necessary. So, that it's sort of like this unbelievable situation, but the way that King writes this stuff is like you're in it. You're a part of it, and you understand why these people believe the things that are happening and why this little girl has so much clout, with the group. So Nick, really does believe her, and against his better judgment, he leaves Toomey and rejoins with everyone at the plane. Dinah's been stabilized enough that they could move her to the plane. At this point, she uses her psychic power to guide Craig through, going in sort of into his mind, or in a way showing up to him almost like an angel, and guides him out to the tarmac, convincing him that the board members who he was originally traveling from LA to Boston to meet with have made their way from Boston and are waiting for him. And I mean, that's a whole nother plot point that we could talk about. Obviously, it's pretty cool in the TV series. If you watch that, the 3-hour miniseries, Stephen King has a little cameo in this part of the story, which I thought was really cool. What did you think about that part of the story?
Yeah, it was cool in the TV series. We have a lot to unpack here, so we're going through it pretty quickly. But there's this like this over everything is based around this time period that they're not supposed to be in this part of space, and the Langoliers are, like you said, janitors. And there's some great quotes around that as well. I believe like Nick is like, they're not hunting us, they're cleaning this place, for instance. So
they're
more of a function.
normally Langoliers, as they call them, are not used to seeing any sort of humanity. They're just seeing an empty world, and they're just cleaning it up. And as they clean it up, it's just nothing there. It's just not even space. It's just blackness.
But there's a great shift in, like a really awesome shift in this, and it's just some of Stephen King's brilliance showing through, where you get Toomey as his breakdown. So you get like a clear-cut antagonist that's not just time for his mental break. And I love that they bring it back around of like, no, he's got to be here for us to get back to where we need to be. Like, we have to deal with this crazy man. It kind of reminds me of it is a terrible reference, but it is the one that pops to mind in Armageddon, where Steve Buscemi's writing the nuclear warhead.
Right.
That's exactly who I would imagine if I was making a movie being Craig Toomey at this point.
That, in a bigger production, I could see Buscemi being a great Craig Toomey, or at least a younger Buscemi.
Yeah. So it's a lot of that going on in my mind when I'm, reading through this. And so we're leading up to them attempting to get back home. And this gets into a previous story that we talked about a little bit with the Jaunt.
Absolutely.
And the time trip itself, leaping this far through space, right? Space and time, shouldn't be done while being conscious.
Exactly. And that was something that I kind of neglected, rushing to get us to where we are in the story. But something that they realized on the plane when they start to try to put things together, they haven't landed yet, is that they're like, where is everybody? And why are we here? And all these other people aren't. And then they put it together. They're like, well, I was asleep. Were you asleep? And they're like, yeah. And then they realized they were all asleep, and that the people who were gone must not have been asleep. So
Yeah, it's like kind of a beautiful other side of the jaunt to some extent. So if you haven't listened to our review and talk about the jaunt, this would be a good one to go back to as well after this one, because they kind of the ideas correlate in a very wonderful way.
Yeah.
Obviously, with the jaunt, it's being used more as a almost like a teleportation system, but the idea of being lost in time because you're awake, and losing your sanity and what that does to you and kind of the unexplained nature of that is shown at the beginning of this book, where it's like there's just pacemakers and shoes and just nothingness left of the person.
Right.
It's cool that we got that expanded upon with the Langoliers. And
Yeah.
I'm not sure which one came first. I'm assuming the jaunt came first.
Yeah, the jaunt was, I think, like a late 70s short story, and then this is an early 90s
Yeah.
short story or novella.
I absolutely love when you can tap back into an old idea like that, whether it's writing or like writing a story or a song or whatever, when you could take like an old idea and expand upon it and make something as great as the Langoliers, which we're going through now.
Right.
There's
I mean,
subtle brilliance in that.
King just does that effortlessly, in my opinion. Like time and again, like he just weaves these stories that sort of connect in very like arbitrary ways that are just fun and interesting, and you won't always catch it, especially if you haven't read everything he's written. But the more that you read of his stuff, and then maybe especially for me on rereading things, I'm just like, holy crap, I didn't even catch that the last time. I mentioned it in my notes here, the jaunt being a sort of a connection here. And for stories that are coming down the line, I'm noticing more and more, these just small connections of, like we'll be talking about a story called Revival here in the future, and their connections to stories we've already talked about in the same way, where it's just little pieces where you're like, oh wow, that connects to Joyland, or that connects to Salem's Lot. It's really interesting how he does that.
Yeah, and it's fun, like with the whole general idea is almost the plot to the story to some extent. It's the major overlooming time travel, what happens if you're conscious versus unconscious, whether it's incidental or not. Yeah, so I found myself going back to the jaunt while reading this to be like, okay, let me make sure I remember. And that's always fun, like at least in my mind, like bouncing back and forth between those two things and finding those little nooks and crannies and seeing kind of like a peek behind the curtain of how the writer's mind was working. Like the jaunt obviously was a short story, but he was like, damn, that was a good idea.
Right. And then he's like, how could I, or he just had an idea, he's thinking about, he's written a few time travel stories, or, space and time, and this idea and how to just sort of like give it a different twist. And this one especially is, I feel like, very unique, in its way.
Yeah, because the other one almost feels like it's not set in the future. It's more like alternate reality, I guess, of the time period. But it does very much feel like this timeline is more in line with when this book came out, right? So it's the way that they achieve the jaunt in this book is very interesting, right? And like you kind of get to see more of the aftermath in a way that when we talked about the jaunt, I was like, well, look, there's a lot more, like there's so much more that you could have unpacked, and like that could have been a whole book in itself. And then we start reading this one, I was like, well, we kind of got it. We kind of got it in a different way. We didn't get like what I wanted out of the jaunt with like, well, like what was the original reason they were, like what is the government behind this? There's a lot of question marks in the jaunt, which makes that short story itself very fun. But this is going to give you a fleshed out version of even with it kind of gives you an explanation of like it gives you an explanation of time and space in a way that's like, well, it's kind of unexplainable, but here's a way that like there's these opening riffs. It gives you some detail into what Stephen King was thinking when he did the Jaunt as well.
Right. Well, I just think that the idea that, that the past isn't just a living thing, it's literally just like an empty stage. It's just a really interesting concept in and of itself, not, sort of to break away from what the Jaunt being more like, just the human mind can't possibly comprehend, time in a way that is disconnected from our place in it. And I mean, that's also a really interesting idea that's explored in the Jaunt. But this one it approaches it from another angle, but similar, sort of thinking, obviously.
Yeah, it goes very much into the blank canvas that the Big Bang exploded in, and how many of those are there, and what is time's correlation to that, and is time a flat circle, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There's a lot of floating ideas there. But
These
it's always
big
fun.
questions that we ask ourselves as human beings, and science is trying to explain, and maybe we'll get answers in the future, but maybe not.
Yeah,
But,
we are not we're not gonna be discussing string theory on Bachman's basement. No worries, guys.
But I guess picking up, so Craig Toomey's out on the tarmac. The Langoliers finally breach the horizon. King describes them as just these terrifying spherical creatures, or all mouth, spinning chainsaw-like teeth. These things are here to eat everything: buildings, vehicles, people, even the very sky around them. So they're not seeing, they're just there to eat. And they just leave nothing but a pitch black void behind them as they go. Thanks to Dinah, Toomey serves as a distraction, buying the group time to finish fueling the plane to make their escape back into the sky. And these Langoliers are coming from the east, headed west. And so they're obviously need to head west, which is back to the time rip to get home. So just by the hair of their teeth, they just managed to get out of there, barely avoiding the Langoliers, and get back into the sky. And obviously they know they need to find that time rip again. So Brian gets them back on the same course that they were on before, and just headed west. And he's like, I don't know, I wasn't awake, so I have no idea what this thing looks like. He's like, I guess we'll know it when we see it. But this journey, you have Brian and Nick in the cockpit, sort of just waiting to see what they see. And sort of at the last minute, they do see it, and they realize, oh, right, we're saved, we're going to be able to go through. Bob Jenkins, the writer, deduces a final crucial rule that they had forgotten, which is that no one can pass through the rip while conscious. So again, taking us back around to the Jaunt. So the transition obviously being too violent for the human mind to survive, they gotta all be asleep. This problem that's presented is that someone has to be landing the plane on the other side of the rip. And again, Albert figures out that if the air pressure is dropped correctly, that they'll all go unconscious. But obviously someone has to, be awake to restore the pressure just as they pass through, so that they'll all wake up again. Essentially, someone has to sacrifice themselves. Nick Hopewell volunteers, as he views it as a way for himself to balance the scales of his life of state-sanctioned killing. He's essentially his whole life has been like working for, as a secret government agent to assassinate people that the government just deems necessary, and to shape history, so to speak. So Nick manages to fulfill his promise before being erased from reality and restores the PSI in the aircraft, allowing Brian to wake back and everyone else to wake back up and Brian to land the plane. He brings the plane in and, the sun is rising and you can see Los Angeles, but there's no cars. It kind of looks like Bangor. It seems like they're still maybe in the same situation. So the remaining members, Brian gets them landed in LA. They depart and they're just shocked to find the world is still empty, and they're almost giving up hope before they realize that something's different. The colors are more there, the smells in the air, there are smells, and that they aren't in the past, Bob realizes, but a few minutes ahead of the present, a little bit into the future. And Bob suggests that as he starts to realize what's happening, that they're going to need to be somewhere where other things aren't, like other people or, vehicles or anything. So they've made their way into to the terminal and they're walking around. They try some food and realize that it has flavor and things like that. So he suggests that they get up against a wall and they just stand against the wall in the terminal and they watch as the now sort of rushes over them like a tidal wave of sound, light, and people as it all just kind of comes into being. They're watching the present be born and they've returned to the stream of time, leaving the Langoliers, behind to finish the feast of the scraps of yesterday. So that's sort of like the way that the story concludes, is that they manage, not without great sacrifice and effort, but they manage to get back to their place in time. Obviously, Craig Toomey dies, Dinah dies, Nick dies, and as well as another character that I failed to mention, who I just didn't feel was as an important member of the story. His last name is, I want to say it's Garrity. He's just sort of a smaller character that ends up getting stabbed by Toomey. And I just didn't feel like his character was as important. And maybe that's why King chose to kill him off, because he didn't know what to do with him.
And I think it was very much a writing device of knowing where you're going to go. Right.
He needed more drama. Yeah.
Yeah. Knowing where you're going to go with the story with Toomey and just like, well, I need to write in a character
for Toomey to kill.
Yeah. So when Toomey kills the guy, no one's that disappointed and they'll keep reading.
Yeah.
That's kind of what I got out of it. That's a very television thing. But it definitely felt like that, where it's like, here's this one character. Like Walking Dead did this all the time in the later seasons, where they're like, let's introduce a new character. They're going to die because they're not in the comic and they're not very important, but here they are.
Yeah.
Or Star Trek Red Shirt, just something to move the story along.
Yeah, plot device almost, even though it's a character, and they do have some importance in the earlier part of the story. They're more just there to be another person that unfortunately meets their end before the group escapes. Obviously, I mentioned that there's this television adaptation. It was adapted for the screen by Tom Holland, screenwriter from that time, and presented. He also directs it, presented as a 2-part ABC miniseries, which was released in 1995. Very faithful retelling of the story. Like all of the beats are there, but, and in my opinion, some great actors playing various characters. Dean Stockwell of Quantum Leap fame, as well as, he's playing Bob Jenkins, and David Morse, from such great movies, Stephen King movies for that matter. The Green Mile, he's in Hearts in Atlantis, 12 Monkeys, The Rock with what does that one have? Nicolas Cage and Sean Connery. Sean Connery. And then he also plays an FBI agent in the TV series House. So it's pretty cool. He plays Brian Engel in the show. And that's just a couple of the actors that I just immediately recognized. And I enjoyed watching it. It's definitely a made for TV, if that makes sense. I'm reminded of the tried and true cliche. The book is better than the movie. And it's certainly true here, but this made for TV movie, if you don't want to, spend 9 hours reading the story and you just want the story and all the parts of the story, you get it in this. It's just the special effects are dated, that very much from that time, and what you get with a made for TV miniseries from 1995. So
Yeah, and by dated you mean these look worse than some things that like the X-Files have done, right? Same time period.
absolutely.
I will say this, like you said, very much a faithful retelling. I think Dean Stockwell is great in anything he does. I love Al. Quantum Leap. He's well worth the price of admission of free on Internet Archive.
Yeah.
If you want to go check this out. I remember liking this a lot as a kid. Specifically, we had the VHS. It was like 2 tapes of this, and I watched this a ton of times and had completely forgotten about certain parts of the movie. Specifically, the things that look really bad are the Langoliers themselves, which is a very, I don't even know if in today, the way it's described in the novella would ever look like what your imagination can depict on screen.
Right. It's scarier to have it described and then for your mind to imagine what the Langoliers are than to have it like presented for you on the screen. You're like, oh, those things are anticlimactic.
It's one of those situations where it may have been better to not show it in the film and go like the old, like, because it is kind of very Twilight Zone, to go the Twilight Zone route of like never really show it.
Right.
Just show the fear of everyone when they're being chased or when they see things, like the sounds, like lean more into the audio of it and the your actual character actors than doing special effects. But this is also 1995. So it was made for TV on ABC. I don't know what the budget looked like for that. It's
Yeah.
kind of crazy that this was an ABC miniseries.
Right. It's a
in
weird place
95,
for
like it's
this story to land, I thought. But that's where it happened. And I thought it did a pretty good job with, they did a good job. Tom Holland did a decent job with the budget he had. And like I said, there's some good actors there. You get good performances. The guy that plays Craig Toomey, although he overacts a little bit, also this guy's crazy. So I think he does a pretty good job in that role, that actor.
So Tom Holland of Child's Play fame, right? As the director,
Right.
probably his most famous flick. It's interesting that he didn't have a ton more work in between there. I know there's some stuff, but like looking at the IMDb page for Tom Holland is kind of surprising coming out of Child's Play that he
Right.
didn't get more. I mean, he was a writer on Fright Night. He was a writer on Child's Play. He did Psycho 2. Like he was kind of very relevant. And then you just get a bunch of made for TV movies. Like he fell in with a crowd and they're like, hey, we need some made for TV movies. Like The Stranger Within. He did some Tales from the Crypt. He did Two-Fisted Tales. Like
it's kind of weird. Yeah. Going from like a Hollywood horror screenwriter / director to being a made for TV writer director. Yeah. I guess that, Hollywood is very fickle. And you want to keep working, you just take the jobs where you can get them, I guess.
And what's interesting is there's going to be another one that we're going to have to talk about at some point, both film and short story of Thinner, which he was also the director of.
Oh yeah.
So, and that's the last thing that I have seen of his. Honestly, all of the Tales from the Crypt stuff I would have seen. The Stranger Within, I've seen. Child's Play, obviously. But everything else from that, I mean, looking at this page, it's just kind of crazy because Child's Play's spun off a whole
It's still a very
Franchise.
successful franchise. Yeah. Got a
Right.
TV show that's been running or did run for a few seasons. They've had, a remake, sort of a reimagining, which wasn't great, but it's still an idea that's popular for sure.
Yeah, I thought
Uh,
I thought the TV show was actually pretty good. So when I
no,
pulled this up, right, I expected like director of an episode.
right,
No such luck.
right. Yeah. So, kind of circling back to the story we're talking about, though, in the Langoliers, I would say really just read it. It holds up really well as a written work. And I'm really excited to revisit and share the other tales from 4 Past Midnight with you guys on future episodes. Obviously, if you're too busy to read this one and also don't want to watch the made for TV adaptation, check out the Audible version, which is expertly read by Willem Dafoe. He embodies the voices for the characters and just does a great job narrating the story. So I guess we're getting down to brass tacks here. Bachman score, I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10. I'm trying to be very critical. It could probably score higher, but that's where I'm landing with it. I think it's an excellent story, and really I'm just basing it. I don't want to give anything too high of a score based on all these other stories that we haven't covered yet that I know are just even better. So
Yeah, I'm gonna give it. I feel like 8.5. I think is more than fair. I'm gonna give it an 8. Once again, room, right? For me personally, I loved the story. If I'm combining them, probably drops it to an 8. Uh, though
fair.
I did love this so much as a kid. I watched this so many times. I don't know why my parents let me watch the things they did, but they did.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have a soft spot for the way the Langoliers look, as bad as it is. I do have a soft spot of when they're refueling the plane and you see the Langoliers in the sky.
Yes. Well, as we begin to wrap things up here, if you're looking to find me on the internet, you can find me on Facebook, Christopher Clawson, and on Instagram, Chris_Clawson 1982. And if you want to share your socials, Chris.
Sure, yeah. It's Christopher.r.patton on Facebook and Christopher.r.patton on Instagram. And always, all of the shows are available on boinkstudios.com for free, never cost you a cent. You got Tom Clark's Main Event, which is a professional wrestling live show and podcast that has been going on since 2014. So there's a ton of backlog there. If you just want to revisit something, it's there for you. Bear Mode, a podcast review of the Bear. Tom Clark's 6M podcast, which focuses on movies, music, Marvel, magazines, miniseries, and much, much more. I've been on a ton of episodes of that. If you want to hear me bash on RoboCop 2, that exists. That is out there for you. Or if you want to hear me talk about Exile on Main Street by Rolling Stones and gush over that, that's also out there. Two Nations Under Ted, a Ted Lasso podcast. That the name says it all right there. It's about Ted Lasso. There's a new season coming out. Check that out. It's really fun. Jay Luft and Joe Higgins are on that show from the UK. So you get kind of a difference of opinion and love for the game of football versus soccer on that podcast. Ray Sports and Slams, which is live every Monday at 6. That's your typical sports thing. So if you're into the sports balls, that's for you. And then obviously our show, Bachman's Basement, which you can check out wherever you're listening to it now, as well as on YouTube. And make sure you check out the clips. They've been really funny lately. I've been putting out some good ones. So check those out.
Did you mention Bear Mode too?
I did. Bear Mode.
Okay.
It is a Bear Mode, a podcast review of the Bear, which is they're reviewing every episode of the Bear. Once again, that's Tom Clark, Big Tasty, Joe Higgins, and Jay Luff, the UK boys, talking about the show The Bear, which is a great show and a great way to watch that show because their podcast is really, really funny. If you've never gotten into the show, I watched season 1 and listened to the podcast as they went along episode by episode. And that was a wonderful way to consume that. So lots of content out there. We try to put out as much good stuff as we can. The Patton Report is on hiatus and will be more of a Twitch stream going forward. I am working out the details on that, but we'll keep you in the loop.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for joining us here in the basement. And if you find yourself stuck in yesterday, lingering on old regrets or dead dreams, just remember the cosmic janitors are always on schedule. And they don't just take out the trash. They take out the floor, the walls, and the sky along as well. The moral of the story, keep moving forward, stay in the present, because the alternative is a one-way ticket to a silent airport where the only thing on the menu is you.